Coming up on The World Today. Violence erupts in Mexico after drug lord is killed. Major winter storm hits the U.S. East Coast. Plus, Britain is among the 19 people killed in a bus crash in Nepal. Welcome everyone to The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. Violence has erupted across Mexico following the death of the country's most wanted drug lord, Nemesio Oseguera, also known as El Mencho. The cartel leader, who headed the feared Jalisco New Generation cartel, died after being seriously injured during clashes between his supporters and the Mexican army in Jalisco state. Mexico's defense ministry says 4 cartel members were killed and 3 soldiers injured during the operation to capture him in the town of Tapalpa. Following his death, cartel members launched retaliatory attacks, blocking roads with burning vehicles and triggering a wave of violence across multiple states. An armed man has been shot dead after entering the secure perimeter of U.S. President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida, according to the Secret Service. Authorities say the suspect, who was carrying a shotgun and a fuel can, was confronted by Secret Service agents and a sheriff's deputy before he was fatally shot during the early hours of Sunday morning. The incident happened at about 1:30 a.m. local time while President Trump was in Washington, D.C., with officials confirming there was no threat to the president as at the time of the incident. The suspect has been identified as 21-year-old Austin Martin from North Carolina, who had earlier been reported missing by his family before the deadly incident.
The security detail detected that an individual had made his way into the inner perimeter of Mar-a-Lago. A deputy and 2 Secret Service agents on the detail went to that area to investigate. They confronted a white male that was carrying a gas can and a shotgun. He was ordered to drop those 2 pieces of equipment that he had with him, at which time he put down the gas can, raised the shotgun to a shooting position. At that point in time, the deputy and the 2 Secret Service agents fired their weapons and neutralized the threat. He is deceased at the scene.
Earlier today, 2 special agents from the Secret Service and a deputy from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office were involved in an officer-involved shooting while responding to an armed individual at one of the gates at Mar-a-Lago. Preliminary information indicates that the individual was armed with a shotgun and a possession of a gasoline canister. Agents and the deputy discharged their firearms to stop the threat. At this time, no law enforcement personnel were injured during the incident. We want to be clear, the President of the United States was not in the state of Florida.
Travel conditions are expected to be near impossible in parts of New York City as a powerful winter storm continues to batter the U.S. East Coast. The National Weather Service says some areas have recorded more than 22 inches of snow, with over 15 inches falling in Central Park alone. Winter storm warnings remain in effect from North Carolina to northern Maine, with parts of eastern Canada also affected by the extreme weather. More than 5,000 flights have been cancelled, while hundreds of thousands of people have been left without electricity, as authorities urge residents to stay safe. New Foreign Policy Chief Kaya Kallas has indicated that there may be no immediate breakthrough on a new package of sanctions against Russia as foreign ministers gather for talks in Brussels. Let's take a listen.
What we can do actually about this, we have tools developed that we have helped our friends, other countries with, but it's clear that it's also becoming an issue in Europe. It is clear that we have these networks that are really working against us, and it's also a cognitive warfare. It's a battle of narratives for the hearts and minds, so we are discussing what more can we do in this regard. And then of course, we have a discussion on Ukraine. Tomorrow marks the 4th anniversary of this horrible war. Of course, there's going to be discussion on the 20th sanctions package, but as you all know, I think there is not going to be progress regarding this today, but we will definitely make this push. Then also the discussion about, what should we talk to the Russians about. It's clear that the pressure so far has been on Ukraine when it comes to the peace talks, but it's clear that it has to be on Russian side because they are the aggressor in this war. And if we want this wars to stop, if we want this not to go any further, then we also need to see concessions from the Russian side. That's also very clear.
In South Africa, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, is set to deliver the 2026 budget speech, his second under the government of national unity. The address comes at a crucial time for the country's economy, with tough fiscal choices expected to take center stage. Last year's budget proved highly contentious, drawing sharp criticism from opposition parties and sparking widespread concern from civil society over proposed VAT increases. This time around, all eyes will be on whether the minister can strike a balance between fiscal discipline, political consensus, and the pressing needs of South Africans. Our correspondent, Innocent Timosa, has more.
As South Africa prepares for this week's budget speech, expectations are fairly clear. This is likely to be a cautious and disciplined budget rather than a dramatic one. Now, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is, of course, expected to focus heavily on stabilizing public finances. Government debt remains pretty much high, and there will be a strong emphasis on keeping spending under control and narrowing the budget deficit. Now, investors, of course, will be closely watching to see whether Treasury sticks to its plans to fiscal consolidation, as they previously spoke about the fact that they want to move towards fiscal consolidation. Now, on the tax front, most economists here don't expect any major surprises. A VAT hike or significant new tax increase are considered unlikely at this stage. Instead, the focus could be on improving revenue collection and maintaining the current tax framework. But we do know that the long-standing issue, it has been that of South Africa's debt levels that is pretty much high, as I've mentioned. Should we expect any major changes to the debt trajectory? Now, I had a chat with economist Makwema Selela. Take a listen to what he had to say.
The government can make sure that they don't borrow more money out there, and for them to be able to do that is for them to make sure that the economy grows, because as the economy grows, then the guys will be able to collect more tax. But also bear in mind that, especially in dollar terms, the cost of borrowing, as we're talking now, are more or less cheap, so they can also look into ways of borrowing in a very cheap way.
Well, we're also likely to hear commitments to infrastructure spending, particularly in energy, transport and logistics, as we do know that the South African government is actually trying to support economic growth. Now, at the same time, there will be, of course, pressure to balance fiscal discipline with the need to stimulate job creation and protect social spending in the country. So far, overall, I can say that this budget is expected to see a message, or should I say, to send a message of stability and continuity, reassuring the markets while trying to address South Africa's slow growth and high unemployment rate. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
And we're here in Nigeria now, from the economy to healthcare. The Oyo State government in southwest Nigeria says it remains committed to achieving a prosperous state where residents have access to quality, affordable healthcare anywhere they live, no matter how remote. To this end, Governor Seyi Makinde embarked on an aggressive rehabilitation of primary healthcare centers across the state to ensure that the closest level of care to the people has all necessary basic facilities.
Healthcare centers are the closest to the people, but for a long time, they have suffered some neglect with half-hearted policies, bedeviled with even poorer implementation processes. The indices from this neglect have worsened maternal mortality ratios across the country, with Oyo State having an unfair share of it. Not happy with this, Governor Makinde gave marching orders to all involved to ensure that urgent measures are taken to salvage the situation, beginning with an aggressive upgrade of the primary health care centers.
So, okay, we've got renovation work done, but we need to now upgrade them to make them fully functional. And part of the upgrade is to make sure they have energy, electricity supply 24/7. They should have water supply 24/7, and also they should be able to dispose of the waste. Apart from having a sustainable drug revolving fund, they have basic equipment that they would need to manage patients that come to the primary healthcare services.
More than 200 PHCs have been rehabilitated across the state. Each of 2 primary health care centers per local government area of the state now has uninterrupted running water from boreholes powered by solar-powered inverters.
All the health activities of this facility and other facility where they have the Oyo State government and the First Aid Technical have actually installed this solar system. They can work without thinking of Nepal or thinking of buying diesel or generator for anything. So this is a massive intervention from the Oyo State government. This is the 4th month this has been serving this facility and all other facilities in all the local government that has been installed.
Testimonies abound from workers and residents on this new lease of life given the healthcare facilities.
We have good facility now, and the nurses, they are improving. Seriously, they are improving.
Before I came here, after I came here, there's no solar, no light, no anything. But now, we can probably, there is a solar, there is running water, renovation of toilets, equipment. There are so many equipment we didn't get before, but now we can have a lot of equipment in our labor room, even for the infants, for the ANC. They provide a lot of things for us that make us our work going smoothly.
With uninterrupted power supply complementing basic operations of these PHCs, more lives, including those with respiratory distress, can now be salvaged instead of traveling far distances to secondary healthcare centers.
I think the governor, his intentions are being achieved, and I think this is going to be gradual. So this is the first phase. The first 66 PHCs is the first phase. I also know that the primary healthcare board has undertaken another 106. So in effect, within the next 1 year, we hope to cover more than 300 PHCs.
With the first phase of upgrades done, expectations have risen for more as people get used to a system that works, promoting livelihoods and increasing productivity as only a healthy population could. Bukola Uriu, Channels Television News.
And still ahead on the program. Visitors gather at Tongdosa Temple in South Korea to witness the famous blooming red plum blossoms. Welcome back to some tragic news. At least 19 people, including a British tourist, have been killed after a passenger bus crashed off a mountain road and plunged into a river in Nepal. Reports say the bus was traveling from the tourist city of Pokhara to the capital Kathmandu when it fell more than 200 meters into the Trishuli River early on Monday morning. Authorities confirmed that 44 people were on board the vehicle at the time of the accident, with 19 confirmed dead and 25 others currently receiving treatment for injuries. Local officials say rescue operations were launched immediately as investigations continued into the cause of the country's deadliest road accident in recent months. Well, 100 billion euros French-German joint defense plan looks close to collapse. The FCAS Future Combat Air System was supposed to show how European governments can work together in defense by increasingly it looks like national interests continue to come first. Well, let's get more on this from DW correspondent Arthur Sullivan. Arthur, great to see you. What exactly is the FCAS and why is it reportedly on the brink?
Yeah, so this FCAS, as it's sometimes referred to, Future Combat Air System, it's still only an idea, but the idea is that European nations, in this case France, Germany and Spain, would work together on a common air defence system and, most importantly, on a state-of-the-art so-called sixth-generation fighter jet. That's the big element of this plan. And that idea is that the fighter jet would become the backbone of European defence. It would become the preferred choice of the continent's militaries. Now, the idea is 10 years old. It was first launched back in 2017 by Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, and the then German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. However, since that time, and particularly in the last couple of years, it's really been beset by an industrial dispute between the two main companies, France's Dassault and Airbus, the German wing of Airbus. And now there is speculation that either the project will be radically restructured or shelved entirely. Now, the original plan was for this fighter jet, which would also work in coordination with drones, combat cloud technology and various weapons, an entire air defence system. And the French company Dassault was primarily tasked with working on the jet, with Airbus working on the other elements. But the two companies have been repeatedly clashing over the jet itself, over its development, over exactly what it would do and over who would control it. And now this industrial dispute is becoming, in a way, a political one. Just this week, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz strongly hinted that the project would have to be shelved, and he specifically referenced the fact that France wants to build a nuclear-capable aircraft that Germany doesn't. But all in all, it's not a good look for a continent that is talking about solidarity and working together at the moment in the face of various challenges and threats.
And in general, how well are European governments working together on this FCAS and generally the topic of defense?
Yeah, and interestingly, this week here at DW, we did speak to one of the main figures in the story. That's the CEO of Airbus Defence, Mike Schulhorn, and he did emphasise to us that in many areas the FCAS project is working together, is working quite well, but just not on the biggest part, which is the fighter jet plans. He talked, for example, about the Eurofighter. That's an existing fighter jet program that does involve 4 different European nations, and that does work well. And there are other examples of successful defence collaboration. But on the whole, there is this consistent and very justified criticism of European governments that they're not aligned well enough on defence. And that means that they don't use money efficiently, and they also don't necessarily build the best systems. So to give you a very quick example, when it comes to procurement in the defence sector, a lot of governments and companies are still thinking in terms of their own national industries. And it means that when it comes to certain military applications, equipment or models, there could be 5 or 6 or 7 from Europe and just 1 from the US. So it means that there's far more costs on the European side and a lot less efficiency. And that's why the potential failure of FCAS here matters. It's more fragmentation and, again, that lack of a common purpose.
And the bigger picture, after years of dragging their heels, European NATO members do ultimately seem to be spending on defense. But are they spending on the right things?
Well, the thing is, there is no question that the bigger picture here is that it is a completely transformed picture for Europe when it comes to spending on defence in Europe. For decades, European countries dragged their heels on defence spending. The NATO target was 2% of GDP, and most of them didn't even reach that for a long time, including Germany. Donald Trump, among many others, heavily criticised that. And part of the reason for that lack of spending was this so-called peace dividend during the 1990s, the 2000s, the 2010s. A lot of these governments were happy to not spend on defence if they could get away with it and use that money for social spending and other things. But we know that those days are over. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European governments have had to spend more. The NATO target has moved from 2% to soon be 5%, with 3.5% of that on core military expenditure. That's a huge jump. And it does look like most European NATO members will meet that by the time it comes into effect in 2035. But finally, there is this nagging concern that a lot of the money that's been spent at the moment is actually not being spent on the right things, that still too much of it has been spent on traditional military equipment, like tanks and so on, but not enough has been spent on the kind of innovative technology, drone technology, AI-enabled tech and so on, that could perhaps boost the economy in the longer term. So room for improvement, but the fact is that Europe is now talking about what it's spending on defence rather than the fact that it's spending at all. So that at least is an improvement and a sign of progress.
Well, certainly. Thanks again, Arthur. And finally on the program, visitors gather at the Tangdosa Temple in South Korea to witness the blooming of its famous red plum blossoms and the rare appearance of undumbara flowers. Footage shows crowds walking through the historic temple grounds, taking photographs of the blossoms, which have transformed the site into a major seasonal attraction. The temple, which has stood for more than 1,300 years, is also home to a 350-year-old red apricot tree known as the Jajangmyeon, named after its founder. The blossoms have continued to draw large numbers of tourists, with visitors enjoying the scenery and marking the approach of spring. That's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Choka Rogers.